I've been riding bikes longer than you've been alive. And most days my memory is like an old shed, dusty and half empty. But there's one day that never left, sits there clear like it happened this morning. And it's strange what sticks with a man, because it ain't the loud days or the wild ones. It's the quiet ones that stay, the small moments nobody else would even notice. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. I remember we was parked behind a diner off a long highway. Nothing special about the place, just gravel, a soda machine humming, and the smell of old frying oil drifting out the back door. And we were just sitting there doing nothing important, which is what we did best back then, wasting time like we had barrels of it. And that's when I first saw the kid, skinny thing, dusty shoes. Clothes patched up like they've been stitched more times than they've been washed, standing near the wall like he. Wasn't sure if he was allowed to take up space, and I recall thinking he looked like trouble the way stray dogs look like trouble, not because they are, but because folks assume they are. He didn't beg, didn't talk, didn't even look straight at us, just watched in that quiet way some people got like they measuring things. And one of my guys, Leon, tossed him a wrapped sandwich we didn't want, just casual, no kindness speech or nothing, and the kid caught it clean, nodded once, polite like he'd been taught manners somewhere along the line, which surprised me more than it should have. And I remember thinking that was odd, because kids out on the road usually learn rough habits. Fast, but he said thank you clear and simple, voice steady. And that stuck in my ear for some reason I couldn't name then. What I thought back then was it meant nothing. Just a hungry kid getting food, just another roadside face passing through our day. And if you asked me that night, I'd have told you I wouldn't remember him by morning, because that's how life was for us. Faces come and go, towns come and go, nothing plants roots, and I liked it that way. Or at least I said I did. What I see now, looking back with older eyes and more silence in my life, is that he wasn't watching us like he wanted something. He was watching like he already knew something, like he was checking if we matched a picture in his head. And I missed that completely. Missed it same way you miss a soft sound when your engine's running loud. He stayed there while he ate, not close, not far, just there, and my daughter was with us that day, sitting on the curb drawing shapes in the dust with a stick, and I remember he glanced at her once quick, not strange, not smiling, just noticing, same way you notice clouds moving, and I didn't think nothing of it, because why would I? It was a glance, that's all. The world is full of glances. But memory, don't forget what matters, even if you do. After he finished eating, he folded the sandwich paper neat, real neat, like it was important to leave things tidy, and he walked over and dropped it in the trash barrel instead of the ground. And that small thing, that tiny, useless, polite act, is what stayed with me all these years. Not his face, not his voice, just that simple, careful motion. And I remember thinking he was a strange kid, but in a harmless way. The kind you figure the road will swallow sooner or later, and I went right back to talking with the guys about nothing worth remembering. Funny thing is, I can't recall what we talked about, not a word of it, but I can still see that folded paper falling into that rusty barrel clear as daylight, and that's how I know that was the moment that mattered. Even if none of us knew it, even if the world didn't shake or warn us or slow down, because truth is the biggest turns in life don't feel big when they happen. They feel small and ordinary and easy to ignore. And that was the moment things quietly started going wrong. I've been thinking on that day more than I care to admit, and what bothers me ain't what happened. It's what we didn't see happening right in front of us, because back then I thought I understood people. Thought years on the road taught me how to read a face same way you read a road sign. Quick glance, and you know what's coming, but that ain't true, not even close, and that kid proved it, though I didn't know it yet. See, when I look back now, I remember little things that felt too small to matter at the time, like how he never asked a single question, not where we were headed, not what club we rode with, not even our names, and most runaways ask something, even if it's just to hear a voice answer them. But he didn't, he just listened, like listening was work he took serious. And I should have noticed that, Should have known a quiet kid who listens that hard ain't drifting, he's studying. What I thought back then was he was shy or tired or maybe just hungry enough not to talk. And that made sense to me then. Simple answers always do. They fit easy in the mind and don't ask nothing from you. And I was a man who liked easy answers in those days. But now I remember how his eyes moved. Not nervous, not scared, just careful, like he was keeping track of things we weren't even aware we were showing. Who laughed loudest, who kept their hands in their pockets, who watched the road instead of him. And I see now that ain't how lost kids look at people. That's how someone looks when they're deciding something. One of my guys, Mitch, made a joke about him. Nothing cruel, just biker talk, and the kid smiled polite, small smile, and nodded like he agreed, even though the joke wasn't funny. And at the time, I thought he was just being respectful. But these days, I understand that kind of smile ain't respect, it's caution. It's the kind folks use when they don't want to be remembered. There was another thing, too, something I brushed off so fast it barely touched my thoughts. And that was how he stood where he could see the road and the diner door at the same time, never turned his back fully to either. And I swear to you, I didn't clock that then. Not even a little, because to notice something like that, you got to be looking for meaning. And I wasn't, I was just passing time like always. My daughter asked him what his name was, sweet voice, dust on her shoes, same as his. And he told her Daniel after a pause that lasted maybe half a second too long. And back then I figured he just wasn't used to talking, but now that pause rings in my ears louder than engines ever did, because that wasn't a shy pause. That was a choosing pause, like he was picking which name to hand us. I remember Leon asked where he was headed, and the kid shrugged and said, wherever the road, don't mind. And we all chuckled like that was clever, like he was just some wandering stray with a line he practiced. And I even told him, half joking, that the road don't mind nobody, and he nodded again like I confirmed something for him. I didn't think about that nod again for years. Not until long after things had already turned the way they did. The truth is we saw what we expected to see. Nothing more, just a skinny runaway eating a free sandwich. And when folks expect simple, they ignore complicated. That's just how people are. And bikers ain't special in that way, no matter what stories they tell about themselves. What I realize now, sitting here with time behind me instead of ahead, is that kid wasn't drifting through our afternoon by accident. He was paying attention on purpose, weighing us same way a man weighs a bridge before he drives across it. And every sign was there plain as daylight if I'd bother to look, but I didn't. None of us did, because nothing loud or scary happened to force us to notice. And quiet truths are easy to miss when you live loud. I used to think we understood him just fine, figure we had him sized up in the first minute, but memory has a way of sanding down your pride. And when I go back over it slow, piece by piece, I can see plain as an open road that we didn't understand that kid at all, not even a little. We misunderstood him completely. There's a part of that day I didn't tell nobody for years, not my club, not my family, not even myself if I'm being honest, because it was small and quiet and easy to tuck away, and men like I was back then were real good at tucking things away that didn't fit the picture we like to keep of ourselves. But memory don't stay buried forever, it just waits till the noise dies down, and mine started talking louder as I got older. It happened after the others wandered off toward the front of the diner, leaving me by the bikes checking a saddlebag strap that didn't need checking. And the kid came closer, slow steps, not sneaking, just careful like he didn't want to startle a horse. And he stopped a few feet from me and said, real polite, sir, which caught my ear because nobody called me that unless they wanted something or they were raised proper. And he didn't look like he had much left from wherever he'd been raised. What I thought then was he was about to ask for money or a ride or some favor I'd have to turn down. And I remember already preparing the words no in my head. Calm but firm, same way you do when you expect a request you ain't gonna grant, but that ain't what he did. He didn't ask for nothing. He just looked past me toward where my daughter sat on the curb, tracing lines in the dust. And he said, quiet and plain, you shouldn't stay long. That was it. No story, No explanation, just that one sentence sitting between us like a coin on a table. I asked him what he meant. Not rough, just curious. And he shrugged a little and said, "Somebody's been watching this place." And his voice didn't shake when he said it, didn't sound scared or dramatic, just certain, like he was telling me it might rain later. I remember I glanced around then, slow, half expecting to spot some obvious creep or a cop car or something out of place, but all I saw was heat shimmering off the road and a trucker pumping gas across the lot. And right away, my mind started smoothing his words into something harmless, because that's what minds do when they don't want trouble. They make things smaller so they don't have to move. I told him he was probably mistaken. Maybe he saw someone waiting for a ride or watching for a friend. And he listened to me the way you listen to a radio that's on, but not important, polite, patient, not arguing. And when I finished, he nodded once like he accepted my answer, even though it wasn't his. Looking back now, that nod bothers me more than his warning ever did. Because it wasn't agreement, it was understanding, like he understood I wasn't going to hear him no matter what he said next. He leaned a little closer then, not secretive, just making sure I heard. And he said, "They don't watch the place, mister. They watch the people who stop here." And I remember I almost laughed, not at him, just at the idea, because it sounded like the kind of spooky road talk drifters pass around and make miles feel interesting, and I'd heard plenty of that over the years. So I told him we'd be gone soon anyway, nothing to worry about, and I gave his shoulder a light pat like you do with kids when you're ending a conversation, and he stepped back right away, not offended, not upset, just finished, like his part was done whether mine was or not. At the time, I felt calm, maybe even a little amused, thinking I'd just been warned about shadows by a boy who'd probably slept too many nights alone, and I went back to my saddlebag like the moment was over and settled. But memory don't see it that way now. Now when I replay it, I hear how steady his voice was, how careful his words were, how he didn't try to convince me or repeat himself or add drama. And that's what tells me he wasn't guessing. He was telling. And I was the one guessing. I thought I was the older one, the road-wise one, the man who knew how things worked, but truth is I was just louder, not wiser. He walked off after that, same quiet steps, and a minute later my daughter waved at him, and he waved back, small and polite, and that was the end of it as far as I knew then. But sitting here now, years laid out behind me like miles of highway, I can see that wasn't the end of nothing. That was the warning, plain and simple, handed to me gentle as you please, and I let it slide right past because it didn't sound important enough to carry. I've replayed that moment more times than I can count, wondering what might have changed if I just asked one more question or looked a little longer or trusted the calm voice of a kid who had no reason to lie to me. And all that thinking always lands in the same place. Same quiet truth I can't shake, that he told me straight, and I was too sure of myself to listen. And I reckon I'll be wishing I had listened for whatever years I got left. The hard part ain't remembering what happened after. The hard part is admitting how ordinary it all looked while it was happening. Because when people hear a story like this, they expect something loud or sudden, but truth is the cost of a mistake usually walks in soft shoes. And that day it did just that. We left the diner maybe 10 minutes after the kid wandered off, engines starting one by one. Same as always, no rush, no worry, just another stop on a road full of stops. And I remember thinking about nothing more serious than whether we'd make the next town before dark, which tells you the shape of my mind back then, smooth and empty like a clear sky, not a cloud of concern anywhere. What I thought at the time was that his warning was just road talk, the kind lonely folks make up so silence don't feel so big. And once we pulled out onto the highway, I didn't spare another thought. Not even when I glanced in the mirror and saw the diner shrinking behind us. Not even when I noticed a pale sedan parked farther down the lot that I didn't remember seeing before. Because cars come and go same as people, and I had trained myself not to wonder about every little thing. We rode maybe 40 minutes before we stopped again, this time at a rest area with cracked concrete tables and a map board sun-bleached, so bad you couldn't read half the towns on it. And everything still felt normal. Wind in our ears, engines ticking as they cooled, my daughter humming to herself while she walked along the painted curb pretending it was a balance beam. And if you'd asked me, then I'd have said the day was plain and harmless as any other. It wasn't until later, much later, that the pieces started lining up in my head like fence posts you only notice once you've passed them all. See, nothing happened right there in front of us, not in a way you could point to and say that's the moment. And that's what makes it sit so heavy on me now, because there was no crash, no shout, no sign telling me I'd missed something important, just small things drifting past one at a time, too quiet to raise alarm. A man walked through the rest stop once, slow steps, hands in his pockets, eyes moving but not landing long on anything. And I remember noticing him only because he didn't use the vending machine or the restroom or the map. He just passed through like he was measuring the place. And I watched him maybe 2 seconds before I looked away, because staring at strangers ain't polite, and I'd never been a suspicious man. Back then I told myself he was just stretching his legs same as anybody, and that explanation felt good enough to keep. So I kept it. We mounted up again after a bit and rode on, and the day rolled forward like days do, steady and quiet. And if there was a turning point in those hours, it didn't announce itself, didn't wave or call my name. It just slipped by while I was busy being sure nothing was wrong. It wasn't until night settled and we reached where we were staying that the wait started, and even then it didn't drop all at once. It settled slow like dust. I won't dress it up for you because it don't deserve dressing up, but something we had that morning was gone by night, gone in a way that don't make noise, but don't come back either. And I stood there feeling a space where it used to be, trying to understand how a normal day could carry that kind of ending inside it without showing a single sign. What I realize now, after years of turning it over in my head, is that the cost wasn't sudden at all. It was already riding alongside us from the moment we left that diner, same quiet as the kid's voice when he warned me. And I had every chance to notice, every chance to slow down and look closer, but I didn't because nothing forced me to. People think danger looks like danger, but most times it looks like nothing at all until it's done being patient. I've gone back over every mile of that day, more times than I can count, searching for a loud moment I could blame, some sharp sound or clear sign that would let me say there, that's where it all broke, but there ain't one, just a trail of soft moments I stepped over without seeing, and that's the part a man can't fix, not with time, not with sense, not with regret, because once something quiet is taken from your life like that, it don't matter how long you sit remembering, something was lost. That can't be fixed. I tell this story now because I got to, not because anyone needs excitement or a lesson wrapped up neat. I tell it because the weight of remembering it alone grows heavier every year, and a man can't carry some truths forever without spilling them out, even if it comes out messy and quiet, the way it was lived. Sitting here older, hands still marked by road work and engines, I think about that kid more than I think about the rides, more than I think about any one night with the club, because he taught me something I wasn't ready to learn at the time. That even small people with quiet voices can hold truths louder than the world around them. And if you ignore it, the consequences don't vanish. They just follow you, patient and steady. I remember how polite he was, how careful with his words, how he never asked for nothing, and yet gave a warning I could have taken hard if I had been listening instead of nodding and smiling and thinking I was wise. I remember my own pride then, the quiet kind that sits under the skin and tells a man he knows more than he does. And I remember how it let me ignore the kid's words, let me miss what he was telling me in the clearest way he could, because I figured I knew enough already. I think about my daughter that day too, about the way she waved at him after he left the diner, and how she never knew what he'd seen or sensed because she was just a child, and children see the world in pieces that don't fit together yet. And adults see it in pieces they refuse to fit together. And that's why some mistakes stretch across years before you even notice the edges. I've gone back in my head countless times, walking that gravel lot, the cracked curb where she drew in the dust, the rusted vending machine humming behind us. And I see him exactly where he was: quiet, polite, attentive, and I feel the shift that didn't make noise then, but carried everything forward anyway. I tell this story because I wish someone had told me once that quiet things can break you more than noise, that a warning can come without a shout and a lesson without a teacher. And if you don't pay attention, the world doesn't stop. It just keeps rolling, leaving you behind to pick up the pieces. I think about the club, the men I rode with, some still riding, some gone, and how we all missed him, missed the small moment that could have made a difference if we had noticed, if we had asked one more question, if we had trusted a kid instead of our own assumptions. And I feel the weight of that even now, sitting in my quiet room with the walls pressing close with memory. I don't tell it to make anyone feel guilty or scared. I tell it because the truth sits heavy on me. And maybe if it's out there, if someone else hears it, they'll remember that small, careful warnings aren't easy to spot, and missing them can cost more than you think, more than money, more than time, more than life as you knew it. I tell it so the memory has company, so it don't ride my shoulders alone anymore. And maybe because I hope someone listening will notice the quiet voices, the small gestures, the things that seem unimportant but carry weight, because those are the things life uses to tip the scales, and tipping them too late is a burden you don't shake off. And after all these years, I realize there's nothing I can do to change that day, nothing I can say to make it right. And there's no moral you can wrap up in a neat bow to make it feel finished, because the lesson doesn't end, the loss doesn't vanish. The warning was real, and the moment passed, and the world went on, same as it always does. So I leave it with you like this: quiet, honest, unfinished, because that's the shape of it. That's the truth of it. And I've learned that some lessons are only useful if you notice them before it's too late. Listen carefully, watch closely, and don't let the small things slip past, because they carry more than you'll ever know until you feel the cost.